John, we are back. Welcome to our Unriveted podcast, where we dial in on technology, the intersections of digital transformation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and people. In this podcast, we're going to talk about topics that could be from the past, the present, the future, and as they apply to all these, in addition to process automation for the future. This episode is brought to you by Wignut Investments, where we accept tightening of the screw to drive the ROI that's much needed. Hey, John, what are we going to talk about today?
All right, Martin. Well, I'm glad you asked. So today we're going to go off on a new area of conversation that we haven't touched on yet in our podcast, but we have many more episodes to come. But today we're going to start off with a high-level overview of what we are talking about when we say observability and how observability applies to our digital realm. And I know that you yourself are quite the subject matter expert on the topic, are you not?
John, I think I can. Oh, there you are. I observe. Yes. Observability. It's the topic of today, and I appreciate the honor to be able to talk about this. I talk about it a lot. It is a passionate topic. I've been part of the journey. So let's just do a cursory overview for the audience, just to let you know we're talking about general monitoring tools as they lean into observability, and we get into what does that mean and what defines observability, and we'll go at the high level. We'll drill into some things. We may go through a couple of acronyms here and there, do some show and tell. But before I go down the realm of all the pillars of observability, let me tell a story of what it would be like, and I'm going to show a visual. You're the pilot of an airplane, John. And this shirt might help you what airline it might be. But imagine today you get to fly between the islands, and it's foggy, and we know some of these islands are hillier than others, and you don't have an instrument panel that works. So imagine flying an airplane in the fog without an instrument panel, and you guessed it, you could fly into the side of a mountain. So a few visuals for you just to kind of put some color on this. So in the world of applications, services, and anything in digital, you cannot tell the health, conversion, or any metrics around your solutions, you are flying blind. Let's just be clear. You're flying an airplane without an instrument panel. John, process that for a moment.
It's totally understandable, Martin. I'm getting the visual in my head. Thank you for sharing those visuals with us, too. But it does not seem like a situation I would like to be in. So tell me more, please.
Sure, John. So some of the pillars of observability as we know them today can be simply stated as infrastructural, and then following it up with application performance or APM, digital experience, logs, next order traces, and metrics. But let's dig in a little bit. So under infrastructure, we can load in a lot of things here. We can have agent-based technology. The agents can be deployed on infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or on cloud. We can add then also tentacles to cloud presence providers such as AWS, Azure, GCP. Yes, even IBM's in this market. And we'll bypass some of the others for now. I know they're there. The other thing that's all the rage is, that we talk about containerization of infrastructure and things with the sound of something that could be related to ships, but they call it Docker, or another way, K8S or Kubernetes. So we can get intelligence on a pod, a cluster, the state, things that are relevant to that service, microservice, or full application as it's deployed. And, we keep moving up the chain with process metrics because there's elements that can help you with the running state of a process, its health, it's frozen, service checks, that port is responding, that port's not responding for those in the know. in the example of like a connector or listener in a application TCP/IP port, to be able to check that. You can automate it. And many of the commercialized tools have connectors built in, and they're built in for various data systems, like Microsoft SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL, Redis, Oracle, you name it. Oh, mouthful. John, pause. Any questions right up front?
So I just want to make sure I'm following you, Martin, and, for the sake of dialogue as well. So basically, if we've created some sort of system within our organization to perform some sort of task, that could be a software system, it could be deployed on-prem, it could be deployed in the cloud. Regardless of how it's deployed, I think if I follow you, what you're saying is, sure, it might work and it might do what we think it's supposed to do and what it was designed to do. But at the end of the day, if we don't really understand how it's working internally, we're asking for a boatload or maybe a plane load of trouble should something break or fail to work. And then if we don't have some sort of observability in place, based on the tools that you just outlined, we could be scrambling around trying to, keep our e-com website running or keep some internal software system for providing our, sales team with cost estimations. Am I following you correct? I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
You're absolutely heading down the correct direction, but you need to round out the arsenal of blades of your Swiss Army knife or tools on your Swiss Army knife to fill that out. So we add in, beyond infrastructure, we get into what's called application performance monitoring, or APM for short. And most of the APM vendors have a built-in piece called AppDex, which is like a ratio of performing versus non-performing transactional execution, frustrating execution, and it bubbles it up, in addition to specific language support to actually catching errant conditions, performance bottlenecks, exceptions, and getting to be able to drill in right to that line of code or area of code where it's suspect. Magic. It's like having a debugger in the old school world in the sky, or in other terms, in the cloud.
In the cloud. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, there's still some general use cases for a debugger, right? But you're thinking about it more of a holistic sense rather than something that's debugging individual lines of code, right? You're thinking of debugging at a system level, hence application performance monitoring, correct?
That is correct, John. And you know what? There's still a couple more pillars we still haven't hit yet to dig in a little further. Let's talk about like digital experience, AKA synthetic monitoring, API monitoring. What is your customer seeing? And testing those customer test points from multiple spots of the globe. That's magic. It's a great way to measure SLA of a service, SLA of your e-com site, or whatever it is you're trying to perform, and you're trying to monetize, and you have to rationalize that not only to your customer, but also to your internal staff, all things operational up and running. Let's jump down. We could dig into that on its own, but let's dig into a couple more things. The dirty word of the day, logs. Well, when the logs roll over, we might die, but hey, but let's just...
You're going off on a tangent here, Martin.
All right.
But I follow you, though. I'm locked in.
All right. So we'll rerun that. So we're going to talk more about logs, and let's think about system and service logs, application logs, higher order metrics you can derive from logs. I'll show some pictures, some show and tell of things you can grab, things like units of things that happen over time. So basically, if it's in a log and you can run a regex expression, which is an ability to capture a text pattern, and that text pattern could be that magic number, and you have a time you capture it, the next one, the next one, the next one, you can run a nice visual of time series plotting. And that comes out very nice and helpful for how many widgets did I sell today? How many things broke? How many, et cetera. Patterns. Think about patterns. And there, from that point, we get into higher level things where you derive metrics and traces off a combination of everything we talked about. And you can derive second order solutions. And this is like really watching the cash register run real time. And you have to be careful because this is a solution often in the cloud with the potential of grabbing that cash register data that you don't necessarily want to be in the cloud, but the potential's there for you. You can do it. Some other second order things you can get from these solutions, which is really cool. And I'm going to say it, it's going to be geeky, network performance monitoring, NPM. So what's cool is a couple of these solutions, they don't sell themselves as NPM, but they give the capability. They're looking at like services between API connector, this service, that service, and they give you timing and hops and things like that. Super helpful. There are dedicated tools for that modality, but some of the observability vendors are covering it. Then the other couple things that security vendors are jumping into of late, and actually of about a year and a half ago or into recent, is security. And security is a realm that's a little more nascent for automation and intelligence. It's just a different staffing type where the DevOps group or the SRE group that typically comes in from monitoring to observability may have more automation skills. So they'll listen for these opportunities with SIEM or SIEM, depending on how you want to pronounce it, which is basically a level of application for security placed on top of logs, looking for special regex patterns, inferring there's an issue from a security sense. And then the other integration I'm seeing from a specific vendor is called RASP, which is real-time application security. And that's very cool. So at runtime, capturing things. So there could be an opportunity for the security vendors to get a little invasion of the observability people coming in. And so I see that happening. Let me pause. I think I can stay on this monologue, John. So help me out.
Yeah. So if, to summarize, I think what I'm hearing from you, Martin, again, you're the subject matter expert on observability in terms of, system architecture and infrastructure. Absolutely. But it sounds like it's a very multifaceted space. And then it pretty much touches on every single component that one might have to deal with. Even if you think about a software tool composed of microservices, each one of those microservices in and of itself could be a potential point of failure and therefore requires some level of observability for us to understand the inner, machinations of how it's working in order to, keep some of these things from occurring. So I just want to make sure that I got that right.
So that's a great segue to kind of show and tell examples of maybe some dashboards and examples. Here I'm going to bring up a couple examples, and I'll talk through the visual of it. You'll see an nondescript vendors example, and and then I'm going to quickly transition to a couple others just for the visual eye candy appeal that you're going to see. And these are all interesting, and I'll show yet another just to kind of show there's different variations. And some of these vendors make the creation of these dashboards very easy and intuitive, and it's sort of magical to rise up to help you understand. And ultimately, your goal is to detect something, remediate something, and move forward quickly. And so that's the next area we should get into is these pretty pictures that I'm showing, and I'll pause for a moment. These pretty pictures are great, but something broke. And how do we know it's broken? Well, John, glad you asked. Let's say the A word. Let's say it together.
Alerts.
Let's try it again. Alerts. Okay, whatever.
That's close enough.
Many times, what I see is there's the out-of-the-box level detection for warnings and alerts, and those need to be tuned, often set up for policy for how you do your thresholds, calls to action. And from there, if it's not actionable, should we care about that alert, John? Let's just say that. Do you care?
Right. Well, if I can't do anything about it to remediate or bring a solution to the issue, then it seems like having an alert that is unactionable is not really providing that much value for my team, right?
And it's funny you said that, John, because very often I'll come up to someone on my team or another team, and we'll be looking, let's look at what they're doing for your monitoring of this. And we go, and you'll see half the screen is red. And I'm going, why is that red? Do you care? Okay, so let's look at why it's red and why you should care, and make it either actionable or make the thresholds change. So that's a common challenge. Not rocket science. It's very straightforward. It makes sense. And then on top of that, you can link those actions to runtime runbooks, online runbooks, online automation runbooks that actually do something on your behalf with a proxy and a script. Magic, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Right. And I think, you hit it right there is, and that's kind of where we're moving to in this space too, is, not only identifying when an issue occurs, an actionable issue that we can do something to remedy and fix, but also how do we remove one of your favorite acronyms, Martin, the human in the middle, HIM. How do we remove him and automate the process of fixing that problem on its own? Although we still want to have the outside, human in the loop, I guess, so we can still observe what's going on, even if we don't necessarily have to go and press the big red button to, send the solution into place in a reactive nature.
I agree, John. The key point is we want to be a little bit like the Maytag repairman, so to speak. And if you know those old commercials, the guy looks like, I might be putting on a couple pounds here too, John, but the guy in the nice white outfit with the white hat leaning against the truck. Oh, those machines never break.
Mm-hmm.
If that was true,
yep,
life would be good. So you want to be more like the Maytag repair person in the scenario of developing observability solutions.
Right. Very sleepy. Very, very sleepy because he doesn't have anything to do. He's living the easy life, right?
Let me digress a little bit and talk about how the market sees these solutions. There are open source or free or freemium things you can implement, and there's very commercialized solutions that are out there. Let me start with this slide from Gartner, and I'm going to reference it's a 2022 slide, but it's a good slide. Let me just share. There's for the people that only hear this and not see it. It's a quadrant. There's 4 quadrants. The quadrants typically go from ability to execute vertically and then horizontally. It's going to be completeness of the vision, and each quadrant is known as challengers and leaders across the top 2. And the bottom 2 are considered niche or visionaries. I don't necessarily agree with how Gartner's positioned all of these players, but I generally agree with their upper half, which are the challengers and the leaders. These are the ones in the public market. And I'm going to focus on those first, although I will mention a couple of private companies. They're up and coming just for sake of completeness. They're more players than there are in the public market. And talk about a few of them. Let me digress and go through some of them. I'm going to go alphabetic and not go by the upper quadrant and lower quadrant scenario. And let's start with the letter A for one that I've been in and out of a couple times. And it showed some promise. And then the company got acquired, and that's App Dynamics. And, we can talk about them for a moment. Just mentioned they were acquired by Cisco. But since they've been acquired by Cisco, I openly do not see them in the market anymore. I rarely run across anybody using them as a new installation. Just putting that out there. Then there's a couple of private companies that I've looked at, and I'm going to go alphabetically again. Chronosphere looks very interesting. It's it's a different way of looking at observability. Somebody has a lemon twist on everything how they want to present it. And this one, when I first started watching it, was cute by the name. It was private and now public, and it's Datadog. And, frankly, I think they've come out of the gate with a little more modernized view from the commercialized side.
Mm-hmm.
And, the easy entry pricing and transparent pricing has kind of been magic for them. And I hear the stories of people saying it's, consumption-based pricing is bad. But if you really check them all out, there's consumption in all these models,
right,
no matter how you slice and dice. And we can talk about that sometime when that topic comes up. This is one of my favorite I'm bringing up next. And this one's called Dynatrace. As a hardcore developer, back when I used to have carpal tunnel really bad, and I was debugging stuff Yeah, I know. Dynatrace
Right.
was, I think it's a developer appealing one. It feels more like an internal debugger than many of
Hmm.
the other solutions, and so it stays on the radar. They're the one that also introduced RASP, security
Oh, okay.
presence into their solution. That should be quite interesting. We should keep watching them. Another one that's interesting, although I think they're more, if you follow like the Google type of style of development for that methodology, then this one is interesting, called Honeycomb. I find them quite interesting from that perspective. Just share a little bit. I'm going to keep going alphabetic here because this next one got acquired by a big company too, and these are some former friends and peers of mine. Had this company, it's called Instana, and what they did really well was early on with the containers,
Mm.
container provisioning for observability. And I thought they did that really well. And IBM picked them up in an acquisition. I think they're still interesting, worth a noteworthy conversation. Um, and then the next one, I think you and I have touched around a couple times. It's an anagram of the former CEO's name. It's New Relic. They've been around a while. Technically, they're the old guard now, but they're still in the market. They're a good player. Good solution, and you can
Mm.
build second, third level applications on top. Quite interesting. Keep going down. ServiceNow, believe it or not, did you
Oh,
know
no,
ServiceNow has observability?
I did not. That is news to me.
Yeah, they acquired a company that does basically infrastructure monitoring with second order pieces on top of it. And I have not witnessed them in the market as a ServiceNow offering, but I'm aware of that startup from the where it were and how it's
Right.
going. And I remember their CTO and I chit chatting about the stages of the company. And so I expect ServiceNow to show up on this radar screen more significantly as we go. Going back up into the alphabet a little further. Oh boy, this one hurts me. You know why it hurts, John?
Please tell.
So we think of them as like kind of this log analysis tool, and that's called Splunk. And they
Ah.
came into observability, and I'm going to take a pause. When I say Splunk, what do you feel?
I feel like someone's dropping like a rock into a pond or something, and that's the sound it's making. Maybe that's what they were going for, but am I right? Am I close? Do you know the answer to this question?
Well, I'll stay positive. There are elements of Splunk, the log analysis and higher order tools on top of that are really well done. But then the observability side, the acquisitions that they've made, with the exception of one, I question how they integrate. It's like Frankenstein's monster a little bit. They don't integrate well. They did acquire a very good digital experience company, and kudos because that is a very good service product line called Rigor, and that's part of Splunk now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give them
Mm-hmm.
kudos for that. But the general observability, I'm not going to put them out in the leader spectrum at all. This one's also from the log segment, and you may have heard of them. And it's, think of sumo wrestling, but it's Sumo Logic.
Ah, yep. I'm definitely familiar with Sumo Logic.
Yep. So they're kind of on the radar screen for observability, but still more log focused. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that kind of concludes where I was going to go with this.
Right.
And from that, John, I leave it open to say, hey, what questions could we have?
Well, I mean, it sounds like a lot of what you walk through there, and thinking about it from observability, in general, regardless of any vendor that's selling a solution, is that there's really kind of two sides of the observability world, I guess. There's the reactive way of looking at problems, which you sometimes there's the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, and however that pans out. So sometimes you don't know of an issue until it happens, so you have to be reactive. But then there's the proactive side, right, too, where it's also, how do I take a known problem that could happen at any time and use an observability tool to not only capture that information when it happens, but also to put into place some sort of proactive solution so that I ultimately, can focus my team on other elements of development. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's what we call working towards operational excellence, John. And very specifically, I have led the case of taking information that's captured by these systems directly, the metrics, the actual information, and pulling it off into a secondary system for longer term analysis for doing predictive analysis, such as consumption of memory, consumption of drive space. Those are two common places where things fall apart. Consumption of memory, you can detect a memory leak. Although with APM and some of the other facets of the observability tools, sometimes leak detection is included. But if it's not, long-term memory leaks could be detectable using a second-order derived solution. We've developed that outside these tools and typically do a tangential, run it like a batch job that processes data. So it watches for trends. Same thing for consumption of drive space. And if you think of drive space of any storage, not just a drive attached to a system, but an array of drives running out of storage, or you're overrunning some threshold that you want to manage it better for resiliency or redundancy because you're going to go multi-region, multi-globed in the cloud sense, or multi-globe, one globe,
multi-globe. This is about, this podcast is about the future, Martin. You say it in the preamble at the beginning. So we could be multi-global in, maybe a couple hundred years. So,
John, I like the idea of we'll put it in orbit.
I got one more question for you, Martin. So everything you walked us through observability, thanks for enlightening me in that area because there's a lot to cover. And obviously this is just our overview episode of observability before we get down into the weeds on some of these topics. But thinking about all those services and everything you went through, and it doesn't, you don't have to name names or anything, but from your perspective and from your experience, would you say are maybe the top 2 or top 3 absolute must-haves when you're choosing an observability platform? And you probably already went through those in some capacity, but if you were to rank order, like what is the 1, what is the 2, what is the 3? I'm interested in knowing your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I'm going to put pricing aside for a moment because that becomes a contentious point. I look for less than 3 clicks to the desired result that I'm looking for. The interface, if I'm going to be a call to action is actionable, then I don't want to be driving all around an app to find where the true problem is. 3 clicks or less to getting there. That's number 1. And if I can't do that, I want to throw it away. It means it's not truly helping me in the observability sense. That's 1. 2 is linkage to on-time runbooks because, developing a runbook in a tool is one thing, but I develop runbooks often outside and like a system like Confluence or maybe file system storage. And there's a bunch of, PDF documents that may be updated periodically with runbooks, but generally it's more like a Confluence style of runbooks, and having those links and hyperlinks and calls to action. Those are high on this. Integration with a paging system, such as PagerDuty and the likes, an escalation system. Those are really good. Within all the modalities that we went through, infra, APM, logs, synthetic, metrics, traces, etc. Everything has importance, and if you can lean on that to leverage and make your customers happy, that's the bottom line. That's what we're trying to do, and explain to your CEO why you're spending this money in layperson's terms. You have won the game.
Perfect. And that was number 3. That was the third one. 3.5, 3 or 4.
Who's counting?
Well, I that's okay. There's maybe limiting it to 3 was too much. So, great information, Martin. I appreciate you walking me through that. And I know at a future date we'll talk more about observability specifically from a machine learning point of view. Which is, we didn't really focus on that in this episode, but obviously everything that you walk through is very significant to ML applications and ML pipelines because they all have to be deployed in the very systems that we just walked through in terms of how observability is applied to those. So we'll take a crack at that at a later date and dive into some of these in the not too distant future, I hope.
Absolutely, John. And soon to be released.
Ooh.
coming to a theater near you. Yes, to join us.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. That sounds like a fun time to add to our little party here, right?
With that, this has been fun. We are the Unriveted crew. I'm Martin Miller. You are
John Sukup.
And we are completely unriveted. Till next time.
Thanks, everyone.